Hey everyone, we did cognitive status screening, so that includes some assessments like kitchen task assessment and the children's kitchen task assessment. So the kitchen task assessment measures the level of cognitive support in adults with senile dementia of the Alzheimer's type. Participants are given the task of cooking pudding from a package, so the therapist will kind of go through with the client and analyze their performance when they do it and look at if the person can begin the task, do they have the necessary items, are they performing all the steps when they complete the task, sequencing the activities that make it possible to complete the task, and are they doing it safely. The performance is scored based on initiation, organization, performance of all steps, sequencing, judgment, and safety and completion. So we have a little video to show you that kind of demonstrates that.
Hi Amanda, I am Holly. I'm your occupational therapist, and today we are going to cook some pudding. So we're going to mix this box of pudding and then put it in these 4 different containers. So the milk is in the fridge, okay, and we're going to make it on this burner, and this is how you turn it on, right here, and then just turn it off. And then the instructions are on the back of the box, okay, right here, and over here on the counter. So you can start whenever you're ready. Okay, thanks. Yep. Cool. So first, let's look at the instructions and what do we need first?
I think I need the milk.
Yep. We should probably pour a little bit slower.
Let it cook.
Okay. Thanks for doing that. Good job. Okay, so we performed the kitchen task assessment with Amanda. And so we're going to circle the number that corresponds to the level of support that the individual required while doing the assessment. So initiation, did the individual begin the task when asked to begin? And yes, she was independent from her demonstration. Organization, did the individual gather the necessary items, tools, ingredients to do the task? Amanda required 1 verbal cue to get the milk, so she scores a 1. Did she perform all steps? Did the individual do everything that was necessary to complete the task? Yes. So she was independent in that, so she gets a 0. Sequencing. Did the individual do everything in order that made sense given the task? And yes, she did, so that's a 0 as well. Judgment and safety. So was the individual safe and aware of potential dangers? So Amanda required a verbal cue to pour the pudding more slowly into the bowl, so she got a 1. And then completion, did the individual recognize that the task was finished? Yes, that was independent. So her total score is 2 out of 18.
So again, this is just a quick look at kind of what the therapist was using in the video. Obviously, a lower score, so somewhere in the 0, would mean that they're independent. Their cognitive processing is high. Anything that is closer to 18 might indicate some downfalls in cognitive processing.
Okay, so the other assessment that we looked at was the children's kitchen task assessment, and it's basically just a modification of the adult kitchen task assessment that we just learned about, but this one's administered to children. It measures executive functioning such as initiation, sequencing, safety, judgment, organization, working memory, and it's for kids ages 8 to 12 years of age. This test has been administered to both typically developing children and children with sickle cell anemia. This assessment is administered through the novel task of making Play-Doh. Administrator is supposed to offer as little verbal instruction as possible. And then like the KTA, performance is scored based on several components: initiation, organization, performance of all steps, sequencing, judgment and safety, and completion. So this is a sample of the scoring guide that would be used to score this assessment. And it's very similar to the normal kitchen task assessment. 0 is being independent, and 5 would be that you basically have to do the specific task for the participant, and it looks at initiation, execution, planning, sequencing, judgment, safety, and completion, and it will score it accordingly. Okay, so if you observe some deficits while doing the assessment, this could could carry over to having some issues with completing basic ADLs or IADLs or other occupations in the individual's daily life. So for the kitchen task assessment, if the individual has some issues with certain aspects of that assessment, then for an example of a basic ADL of bathing, they could have issues initiating the task. So are they able to gather all the items that they need? Do they know the first step of taking off their clothes before stepping into the shower? Do they make sure that they have shampoo in the shower? Do they grab a towel? Things like that. Also, are they able to follow the proper sequencing of the steps? So do they know to turn on the water and get wet before putting shampoo in their hair? And then, are they safe? Do they know to hold on to something when stepping into the shower? Do they turn off the water when they're done showering? Different things like that. And then for the children's kitchen task assessment, one of the big occupations that children are involved in is play participation. So are children able to initiate play, such as grabbing a car and pretending to race it around a racetrack? Are they able to problem solve? So if their car is getting stuck on the track, can they kind of smooth out the track so that the car can move easily? And then are they safe? Are they able to ask a parent to help them grab a toy on the top shelf? And then one important thing for the children's kitchen task assessment, and it's not specifically looking for a detection of deficits, but to help find cognitive strategies to help improve participation.
So there are several different ways that these tests can be administered. The kitchen task assessment is typically administered to adults with senile dementia of the Alzheimer's type, which we mentioned earlier. And it's extremely portable, very adaptable to settings, so it can be administered in the individual's home or in a clinical setting. And there's no specific time in which the OT or physician would administer this exam, but studies have shown that it can be beneficial in discharge planning and determining the level of assistance the client needs. So whenever there may be kind of suspicion of some sort of executive functioning deficit, then this test would be administered. Similar to the KTA, the Children's Kitchen Task Assessment also doesn't have a specific time in which it would be administered, but like Angela said, it can be helpful in finding cognitive strategies to improve the children's performance and participation in daily activities. The typical diagnosis, there really isn't one. It can be administered to typically developing children, children with sickle cell anemia, children with CP. it's just a determination of executive functioning. And so it's just helpful in evaluating any diagnosis, whether that's typical or non-typical. And like the KTA, it can also be administered in pretty much any setting. There weren't many studies showing exactly where. There was one showing that it was administered in a school-based setting, but it's also been shown to be administered elsewhere.
So some of these structures that are needed for success in these assessments are, we'll start kind of with the frontal lobe. That's your executive functioning, decision making, so definitely need that in both. It's also, as we can remember, the primary motor cortex is here. So when you have your spinal tracts, like lateral corticospinal tract, to do those skilled movement of extremities, like manipulation of objects and manipulation of like the pudding packet, all of the whisks, or even with the vinegar and doing really small manipulative things to make the Play-Doh. You're going to need that. You're going to need the ventral corticospinal tract. So that's good with posture whenever you're moving your body, head and neck, to get those good postural movements to set yourself up for success when you're making these things. Also, just auditory tract and visual tract, allowing you to hear and interpret directions. Of course, perception is more to the frontal lobe, but the temporal lobe is where the auditory tract goes to. Visual tract goes to occipital lobe. So you're going to need those parts of the brain as well. Again, there weren't any studies that we saw that said these assessments were used with individuals that might have had a hearing deficit or visual deficit as well, but you definitely want to rule that out and make sure that you know if they are hearing impaired, if they are visually impaired, because that could really impact the score, and if they can even hear you to follow directions or even see kind of how to navigate around. So that was our PowerPoint, and we hope you guys enjoyed it.